There's a menace to this machine. This is your look at the McFarlane Toys DC Multiverse Batman from Earth-44. Hailing from Earth-44 in the Dark Multiverse, this Dark Knight was born when an all-powerful AI program designed by Cyborg began to misinterpret its coding to homicidal ends. A cybernetic nightmare, the murder machine is a metallic mangling of the technological power of Cyborg and the tactical brilliance of Batman formed by ever-changing nanobots. Such is a tragic story of the Earth-44 Batman. Before we talk shop about the figure and talk a little bit about Earth-44 Batman, the first thing we're going to want to do is figure out how tall the figure actually stands. While I get those calculations in order for you, the viewing audience, I'd like to also send out a big thank you to the folks over at McFarlane Toys who provided the sample of Earth-44 Batman for this video. Earth-44 Batman stands impressively at 7.3 inches in height. And switching that to centimeters, then you're looking at the figure being almost 19 centimeters, 18.7 to be exact. How does the Earth-44 Batman stack up with some of the other Batman that we've gotten from the DC Multiverse line? Well, let's bring in a couple right now. I guess the one that we want to set the bar against. After all, this one was the one that sort of defined where the series was going. Let's bring in the original Batman. Still love the design of this one. They're roughly about the same height to one another, although you could probably award points to the Earth-44 release of Batman for being literally a bat ear taller than the one that we looked at before. Speaking of also before, one of my personal favorites, here's the Batman from the Batman White Knight. Let's just go ahead and get his feet all straightened out so he stands properly. Although I have to admit, this one is a lot smaller. It was, to this point, my favorite Batman that McFarlane Toys has released. And though I still feel that way, it's quite easy to sort of be teetering on what you like as your newer favorite Batman, because I'm really liking what they're doing with the multiverse lines of Batman, specifically some of the stuff that they're doing here with the Earth-44 release. Checking out the figure's accessories, the first thing we'll have a look at seems to always be the first thing we always look at when we look at these DC Multiverse figures, and that is a trading card. Down below, you can see it's Batman Earth-44, the Dark Knight's metal line, with a nice image here of Batman from Batman Earth-44. Really like the detailing that they did to that. Sort of does show how it carries from the original art styling to the actual figure behind. Of course, you flip it around to the back. You do have a read-up. Source material is Dark Knight's Metal, comics from 2017, real name Bruce Wayne. Height 6'2". And again, a very beefy 385 pounds. Now keeping in mind, again, a lot of this is metal. It's not literally 385 pounds. At least didn't start that way, at least. But a nice thick trading card. As I've said before, I like to put these in my trading card sleeves. The artwork on these is really quite good. And it's always nice to have like a little read-up on each one of the characters that you have these figures for. Other things that come included with the figure as well is, of course, the trademark display stand. Not too much has changed here, and I don't feel like anything really has to change either. A nice matte black surface with the, of course, the DC logo down below there, and just one singular peg. That's, of course, going to attach to the underside of the Batman from Earth-44. I feel like, do I want to say Batman Earth-44 every single time? I'm probably just going to continue to do that. Nice to see that we get ourselves display stands. I mean, you think modestly when you look at a display stand, but there's not many companies that do display stands anymore when it comes to their figure releases. I'm happy to see that McFarlane Toys continues the trend of giving all their figures display stands. After all, he knows that we like to display our figures in different poses than simply just staction museum poses like I've currently got them going right now. The last accessory, and this is kind of fun, he comes included with these tentacle fingers. Really nice the way that they've done this. You can sort of see the mechanized styling that these hands are. Now, again, with Batman from Earth-44, a little backstory actually about Batman Earth-44. In his world, his Alfred was brutally killed, and he had asked Cyborg to create basically an Alfred protocol where it was like a simulation Alfred that was able to do all the things that regular Alfred was able to do. Things, of course, never go that way. And if anybody has learned anything from dealing with Ultron, the Alfred Protocol basically took over and eventually claimed the life of Bruce Wayne, or sort of took over his body, giving him his mechanized state that we're seeing here, which would also explain why he's so heavier, of course, on the back of the card. Anyways, though, for the fingers, you can see that they're sculpted with a very semi-gloss black plastic, and very nicely detailed, each one of the fingers, not the same as the finger next to it, very quite unique to one another, like a really gross looking mechanized snowflake. Now the thing about these is that you can take his hands, either one of these actually, and you just take this hand and you just wiggle it off the peg. Nice large peg to deal with. Then go ahead and take the replacement hand, and this just basically fits on top. I wouldn't necessarily say it's a hand so much as it's just tentacles that are sticking out. Now, you can actually do that on either one of the hands. There's no deciding necessarily shape to it to dictate specifically it has to go on this side. You could quite easily put it on this side as well. The thing that this hand does inherit, though, is a better looking sculpt, as opposed to just a gripping hand. This one that does actually have a neat looking pose to it. So when it comes time to actually displaying the figure, I kind of like the idea of having his hand sort of like up, and then maybe having his tentacle hand, if you want to call it that, slightly draped off to the side. Maybe going that deciding style for the way I'm going to display the figure. I'm not really sure. Anyway, so that's basically the accessories that come included with that. It's pretty cool, again, that he comes included with it. The only thing I could say, perhaps, is I wish that this was the same coloring as the rest of his arms. You can see, like, the rest of the majority of the plastic on his body is very much like this matte black. And yet it does go very drastically shinier here on the tentacles. Sort of wish that they airbrushed the same sort of color scheme or the same styling of black from the arms and carried that into the tentacles as well. For the figure, it's got some really interesting elements going for it. While it doesn't have as much the color that maybe some of the other multiverse figures that McFarlane have released in the past or currently, it definitely does make up for it with the sculpt. While we will look at this at a later part of this review, I just want to give you guys a sneak peek. Look at the stellar work that they did to the surface of the plastic. I just love the designs of that. But before we do that, I want to talk a little bit about the head sculpt. Maybe it's because I like the backstory of the Earth-44 Batman. The idea, the one thing that he would want to keep in his life, Alfred, be taken away from him. That Batman would create the Alfred Protocol, the very thing that would rid the world of the rogues, but also take his body as well. I find there's like a dark irony to that, and I like that that's translated to the character's face. Specifically, I like how that's been translated as well to the plastic version of Earth-44 Batman. I mean, the coloring, I would guess, for the majority of the figure is probably this matte black plastic. It's everywhere. But then there's certain areas that they have gone in and painted, like, for example, the mouth area, the crest above the top area of his cowl, all add a little bit of extra depth and contrast. So it's not literally all that same black plastic that you're going to be seeing everywhere. Of course, there's other colors that we're going to talk about in a second. But I really like the head sculpt, though. Maybe because I'm thinking of the backstory behind it. But as a little nod, I like that there's these little drooped areas of his mouth, that there's almost a sadness behind the scenes. Also, again, you got the nice bright orange colored eyes that are peeking through. I like that because the majority of the head is basically all black plastic, how much brighter those orange eyes appear to be. What's interesting about the head sculpt, though, I'm just going to take this off the ball joints. I don't know, you don't necessarily have to take it off the ball joint, but I just want to take it off to show you that they didn't actually paint it. Instead, what it seemed to be the case, that they actually have a separate orange sheet of plastic that's actually behind the sockets of the eyes. Instead of actually going in and painting it, by having it as a layer behind it, it gives some depth to the eyes. I really like the fact that McFarlane Toys would have done that. Just pop that back into place. And like I said, while the majority of the figure is this black plastic, there we go, I do like that there are little nuances, things that break that up a little bit. Certainly the big standout roles here are done by the blue and the orange. We have the orange on the shoulder sections, and then of course you've got this blue that's sort of vining its way across his body, starting and emanating from his chest, and sort of spider webbing its way out from that, along the areas of its arms, for example, down the areas of its legs. And even actually has that sort of as repulsor blasts in a bit of a way here on the interior of his hand. I really like the emblem as well. The insignia done of the bat logo there is raised and painted brightly in that orange, and this cogwheel of blue outlines that. It's a really nice touch. I like this, how this is also elevated. Something I hope the camera is able to pick up as well is that I like the surface of the plastic. It has like a roughness to it, a texturing to it. Instead of going the route of just a smooth to the touch plastic surface, they actually added a lot of texturing to that. Hopefully the light's also catching that as well. Really nicely done on McFarlane team's part. Continuing our look at the figure, though, there are some areas I feel in the comics were more done in silver, like the areas of his arms, for example, and the lower areas of his legs. Sort of instead been kept to just this dark black plastic, carrying over the role of doing all of the job without painting those areas. It doesn't bother me too much, actually, that the paint was left off. There are a few little elements that I feel like they could have gone in and airbrushed some additional silver to it. But again, it's the sculpt that doesn't let the figure down. So even if maybe some additional paint could have been afforded to the surface of the plastic, the sculpt, I feel, is still more than enough to drive home a really stellar looking Batman. Of course, you do have the ratcheted joints there in the elbow. We'll talk a little bit about that when we talk about the figure's posability. But again, really nice panel lining that they've done to the arms, how that carries over into the hands themselves. Again, the only thing I would say is going back to the tentacle hands. I wish that this would have been a continuation of color to the rest of the body, so it looked a little bit more seamless when you swap the hands out. We won't talk articulation just yet on the figure, but one thing I did want to mention, though, the pegs that attach the forearms to, of course, the bicep, the joints that attach the knees, for example, to the thighs, are all done very noticeably. But I think it works well for this particular figure because he has all those extra things on the surface of his body. It sort of blends in, and you think that that's part of his body and not so much part of his articulation. Like, for example, even down here, very similar in style, though these ones, of course, aren't painted in. They're just the plastic. But he does have similar shapes down below done in blue. Going back to his back, though, I mean, that probably is one of my favorite aspects of this particular figure. Again, when you look at the amount of detailing that they put just to this section right here, which could easily be my favorite thing about this entire figure, this section right here. Could have had afforded some additional paint? Possibly, yes. But again, I think for this particular figure, there's enough going for it with the blue, with the orange, and of course the bright colors of his eyes, that I don't feel like he's robbed, being that he doesn't have any additional color anywhere else on the rest of his body, with, again, a few little indicators there done in blue. And the blue, of course, there on the back of his torso, and the sections on the backs of his forearms as well. Looking at the posability now for Batman Earth-44, his head rotates all the way around. I really want to also note, too, on this particular ball joint, I guess it's maybe just being the fact that the neck is so considerably long, I find I get a much more greater range of motion when it comes to the figure's head sculpt. Not only can I rock it back and forth, and you see how much I can actually do that, but it also does it quite a bit high up as well, quite a bit low as well. Very, very nicely done, though, on the articulation on. And again, I just want to pop this head sculpt off just for 1 second. There we go. Because I want to look at the ball joint. Yeah, I think what works to its favor is the fact that it has a really long stem for its dumbbell ball joint. Again, one ball joint is at the base of the head, and then one ball joint is at the bottom, and that basically just attaches to the socket of the neck. Really like that they used longer ball joints. If they can, I certainly would love to see that for figures moving forward, because you really get a lot of range out of that. Anyways, though, for the shoulders hinge out, and as you saw, I'm sure, as I move those arms out, he also does have the cup socket joint that sort of sandwiches in between the arms and the torso, like that. It works also well on this particular figure because the socket joints are small enough, and they're also hidden as well by having the shoulders draping over top of it. The shoulders are attached right to the very top here and away completely from the shoulder area. So not only when it comes to moving the arms all the way around, these shoulders are nowhere to be found. They move completely out of the way, as you can see right there. The arms hinge out, so going back to that again, I was distracted a bit by the socket joints. Batman from Earth-44 actually can go beyond the point of a 90-degree angle bend. I don't know what that would be. That would be like 100 degrees, possibly even more of that. But the arms do rotate all the way around. Good range of motion happening from those arms. Additionally to that, he does have the bicep swivel. Nice ratcheted joints on the elbows, so you get nice stiff joints. But Batman can still technically pat himself on the back if you wanted to. In addition to that, he also has the hand articulation. The hands rotate all the way around. A good wide range also for the torso articulation. He has a hinge joint that allows, or a ball joint that allows the upper torso to rotate all the way around. Then it takes a break right around here, and then it has a secondary ball joint just at the bottom of the abdomen. And it sort of gets concealed underneath the section of his pants. Well, not necessarily pants, but this section of his body normally would have maybe stood out a little bit more on a regular costumed character. But because, again, he's made up of layered mechanized parts, it sort of then makes sense why the joint looks the way it does, why this sticks out as much as it does. So it doesn't bother me at all. Legs split out. You can see sort of the inner workings underneath there. The legs go forward very comfortably, very easily, and the legs go back as well. He has a slight swivel at the very top, just basically the way it's attached to the joint. He has a double hinge on the knee. No articulation from here. This is basically just a sculpt from the knee down. But then he does have the additional articulation in the feet. The boots rotate all the way around. They hinge up, they hinge down. And then also he has toe articulation, a good amount of it as well. Lastly, he also has peg holes on the undersides of his feet. So again, going back to the point that I had made before, definitely make use of these display stands. The fact that they would take the time and include them, I'd definitely say make use of them. Not only does this Batman look great when you have him just on a museum pose stance, but then keeping in mind, again, with these particular figures, the fact that they are superposable, the fact that they come with a display stand, also lends the idea as well that you can get them in a little bit more dynamic pose. You know what? Let's do that right now. Let's give him a little bit more going on here than simply just having him standing straight. Get the foot plugged into place. There we go. Get that foot peg plugged in. There we go. And get the leg just arched back slightly. Let's get him going in something a little more interesting than just simply having him. There we go. Of course, you could do a lot more than just simply that, but just to give you an idea, with the using of the display stands that McFarlane Toys includes with these figures, you can get a little bit more creative with the way that you display the figures, and definitely would want to get very creative when it comes to displaying the Batman from Earth-44, because I'm really loving what they've actually done with this particular figure. Earth-44 Batman, I feel, is a very valid argument as to why a sculpt on a figure should still be more important than a paint application. Don't get me wrong, there's a lot of great figures out there with stellar paint jobs, but a lot of times paint work can also mask imperfections or things that are wrong in the initial sculpt. Batman from Earth-44, there's nothing he can really hide because he's all just using that black plastic with very little paint to speak of. Like in the comics, it still has it on the shoulders and it still has it around emanating out from its torso emblem. But all the rest of it is just black molded plastic, and yet it still is an effective looking figure. My only complaint, and not even really a complaint, is the fact that the tentacles aren't the same color as the rest of his body. I did see online, I think there's supposed to be an exclusive that's coming out on the Batman Earth-44 release that I think is going more of a shinier black paint. I don't know if that's true or not, but even if that's not the case, I still like what they did here on their initial design of Batman Earth-44. He has the articulation where it counts, which means you can also put him in different poses than simply just having him standing. And again, points I think should be awarded to McFarlane's team for throwing in a display stand. How often at times does companies omit stands altogether? We just recently had a look at figures that don't have any display stands to speak of. So I encourage companies more so moving forward to include display stands. It's a small touch, but it allows us as collectors to display our figures than just having them in a very vanilla, boring pose. I'm glad that McFarlane continues to put display stands with all his figure releases. Let me know down below in the comments section what you guys think of the Earth-44 Batman, whether you picked up this one for yourself or based on this review and this review alone. I'd also like to send out a big thank you to the folks over at McFarlane Toys who provided the sample of Batman Earth-44 that we had a look at in this review. If you're new to the channel and liking the content you're seeing, would you consider the idea of hitting that subscribe button down below, turning, of course, as well, that friendly notification bell on so that you're notified when videos are always popping up onto this channel. I can also throw one also into the mix as well. Monday to Friday, just an FYI, 12 p.m. and 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. That's Monday, that's Tuesday, that's Wednesday, that's Thursday, and yes, that is Friday. That's 10 videos a week. 2 videos a day, 2 p.m. and 12 p.m. I just reversed that. 12 p.m. and 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Mark that on your arm. Mark that on the neighbor's dog. Maybe don't do those either things. Just remember, 12 p.m. and 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We're going to be having a look at a bunch of other DC Multiverse figures from the folks over at McFarlane Toys. So keep those peepers peeled, members of the mob. There's lots of stuff coming your way. And as always, thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.